at the office.
It is, isn't it? I've watched at
So
least 2 films.
I've watched. Yeah, it's been good actually. I've been. I didn't realize how many I'd watched, and tellingly, there's one film especially called Acts of Vengeance with Antonio Banderas, of course. That when I was like looking at the list, I must have watched it last Tuesday or something. I had to kind of look it up to kind of remember anything about it, which is not a good sign. A week on from watching a film.
I watched a film like 2 days ago, and I knew I'd watched a film, but I could not for the life of me remember what it was. I had to go back through my IMDb ratings just to remember what it was. It's that bad.
Oh, that sounds like a proper 9 out of 10 job.
It's so forgettable.
So I'm still laughing, by the way, at the Kellogg's start. When I was editing that last week, I was still laughing at it now. Or it might just be because I edit in a massive room and I laughed once and it's just echoing back. And actually, I'm very sad, but there's still
deeply morose.
So I'll go through mine. So this week I've watched Internal Affairs, Ocean's 8, McBain, Red Dragon, Line of Duty, Acts of Vengeance, Midnight Run, Street Crimes, and Under the Gun.
Oh, nice. Seen a few of them.
Yeah. Oh, really nice.
Oh, I've got a couple of them. Okay, so this week I did watch, on your recommendation, I watched McBain and Edmond. And I've also watched Supernatural Forces, aka The Mind's Eye, A Time to Kill, The Gladiator, Kill and Kill Again, Terminal Force, Moon 44, and Return to Oz. They're the ones I've got like on my preliminary list. There's another load after that, but basically I figure that if I can get through them, and then if we've got more time, then maybe just slip into the second tier.
Second tier. God, they must be real quality. Okay, well, it's an action-packed episode, so should we, you've got more than me, so do you want to kick off?
Well, we could talk about McBain if you want, because this is something I know you watched it and you suggested that I watch it.
Yeah.
If only for the casting choices.
Yeah. The thing is, so yeah, you kick off because it's fresh in your mind, and I'll kind of join in. I will, as a bit of background to people listening. I wanted Ruben to watch it because I know McBain has been a kind of go-to bad action film for a lot of people for decades, and it's one I've always seen and haven't sort of seen around, but never go around to watching. And when I watched it, I was surprised because I thought it would just be some really ropey little dodgy kind of grimy New York action thriller, much as all of the promotion has you believe it is this kind of like cop thriller set in New York.
So little of it is set in New York.
Little of it. He just looked at a postcard briefly at one point, and that's of Texas. And I was going to make a joke about the woman in Texas then, as Charlene something.
Wow.
Spiteri. Charlene Spiteri.
Yeah, most of it is set in South America, really, isn't it? I'm not even. Yeah. Is it named the country? Is it Colombia? I'm not sure.
It does say Colombia, but that's what I was going to say is how it's not only is it kind of weirdly advertised, but also it's a surprisingly large budget, with the explosions and the effects and the cast they've got, and yet it's such a bizarre film. It's
structurally really weird, isn't it? So it starts off with Chris Walken, who is prisoner of war in Vietnam. It's not Is it Vietnam?
Yes, yeah, it is.
I think it is. Yeah. Yes, it must be. Yeah. So he's a prisoner of war, and he's getting a pasting in a prisoner of war camp, thinking, "Bloody hell! I've done this once before in the Deer Hunter. I don't want to do it again." But there you go. There he is, and he gets rescued. And the dude who rescues him, part of the squad, tears a $100 bill, I think it is, in half, gives him half.
Yep.
And then he toddles off back to New York to start a new life. And it's like, what was it, 10, 15 years? I suppose 20 years even?
I think it's either 13 or 18 years.
All right, okay. So he just goes back and becomes a construction worker in New York. But then things kick off in South America, and basically he needs to take a squad back there to take out this dictator guy. I guess some sort of communists. And yeah, that's it really, and start a revolution anyway.
It is bizarre how the guy who sort of the revolution starts the revolution, Maria Conchita Alonso, his sister, how she just instantly travels across continents to find a metal worker in Brooklyn, and like on just on the hope that he will just suddenly be bang up for getting involved in this conflict on a different continent.
She doesn't just, and it's not like she goes to the office or anything. She goes to the bridge he's working on, and they point to like the top of the tower on Brooklyn Bridge or whatever, and she walks up the girder and in high heels and stuff. It's what? There's even a shot of her walking, like her feet slipping off it and stuff. It's like I'm not sure this
Yeah, health and safety.
health and safety is questionable here.
The 80s.
Anyway, so I know James Glickenhaus obviously directed this. I know him through. I thought I know that name, and I know him through Frank Henenlotter. Frank Henenlotter is the one who made the Basket Case films and Frankenhooker,
Right.
and Maniac Cop, I think. Yeah. So, yeah, but this is James Glickenhaus. I don't know how many films he directed, but not many as far as I know. So what I did like the Tangerine Dream music. That was good. Nice bit of subtle kind of milky electronic padding. That was quite nice. Bit Michael Mann in the early scenes. But overall I just thought it's not really a very easy sell as a film, because who's it really for? Because there's not really enough action in it to please action fans, and it's too stupid to please kind of espionage and thriller fans. So, and it's too silly to be taken seriously, yet the subject matter doesn't lend itself to any kind of comedy. So it's weird. It's really weird. And it surprisingly did appallingly badly.
Yeah.
Didn't it make like £10.47 or something?
I think I don't know how much it cost, but it made less than around $500,000. Like worldwide, did terribly. But there's so many like ingredients to it. Like there's the weird editing where they just say they're gonna, like, they'll say, oh, we should get money so we can start the revolution, and then it'll cut to them just taking out a drug den, and Louis Guzman's in the drug den and says, I haven't got any money, you should kidnap a politician, and cut, and they've got a politician and they're hanging him off a roof, and you're like, this is very swift. It's always not about, like, it's just like, oh, we have to explain how we get the money so they can get over there and start the film off proper. But there are so many things that happen swiftly. Like when they're in the air and they're crossing into like Colombian sort of international airspace, and then a pilot comes alongside them and says, right, land. You're basically a civilian aircraft. This is illegal. And then they just say, oh, we know your dad. And then that guy just completely throws his lot in with them and sacrifices himself.
Yeah, he's with them. He's like part of the team then, isn't he?
Yeah, it's and everything is like that. It's like someone says something and it happens. Even when Maria Conchita Alonso's son needlessly sacrifices himself to throw a grenade down like the barrel of a tank, and for some reason stays there instead of just chucking it and jumping off.
But that's not the only needless sacrifice in the film, because there's also, I think it might even be the pilot who's come along. He gets in a truck when they're kind of attacking the final kind of mansion, sort of dictator's mansion. He drives a truck with a bomb attached to it, right? And the plan is that he's going to jump out just before the gates, sort of thing. But then, for some reason, he decides he has to stay in the truck in order to make sure it gets to the gate to blow it up. But what actually happens is he's driving towards it, decides to stay in there and sacrifice himself. The truck blows up way before the gates and just keeps going anyway. And then, so this flaming truck just slams into the gates, breaks them open. So actually, they never needed the bomb in the first place. He could have just smashed through the gates with the truck.
Driven it through, yeah. It doesn't need to be a bomb on there.
So it's bizarre. Christopher Walken is so miscast in this film.
He is. The thing is, I didn't know if he was trying to. For a start, his trousers are astonishing. They're in martial arts expert territory. They're up, and also he's kind of. I thought, is he just not interested? But I didn't know if he was trying to give off like a kind of prisoner of war kind of like emotional distance. But I just think it's just bad acting.
Yeah,
he doesn't seem involved.
I literally wrote in my notes, he comes across as uninterested.
Yeah, everything.
And also, he has been out of the game for years, almost 2 decades, right? And he's really uninterested in the whole thing. So why would he why is he the shoo-in for the leader anyway? Like, why would people suddenly follow him? The bit where where they're flying in the plane, Christopher Walken sees a plane come alongside them, and he takes his pistol out and shoots a single shot through his own window and kills the pilot in the other aircraft. That actually happens in this film. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, with a handgun, and when he shoots him through the window, it's not like he creates a hole, because obviously like and it's all like and everything. It's like, no, he's totally fine. He just pops his finger through it. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I'm not a physicist, but I'm not sure about how well that would work to fire a handgun through an aircraft window and shoot someone like who's flying alongside you. I'm not sure that would work in the way you think it would.
5 feet away, and traveling at hundreds of miles an hour.
Yeah,
you'd have to give it a bit of carry on that shot, wouldn't you?
You'd have to aim ahead of them like in a flight sim.
Yeah, it is just. But that's the thing, when you watch it and all these things are happening and there's these explosions and they've got all this. It doesn't seem to be stock footage, And you think, well, this money's been thrown at it, but why? It's such an odd film to make.
It's and everything about it it's almost like they're trying to make it as unappealing to a mass audience as possible, really, because with the casting, with the title, I mean, McBain, that doesn't mean anything to anyone.
Oh, and also the one good thing about it, the one saving grace, is Steve James, who I do love seeing in films. That's it. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah.
I just like.
So basically, watch it if you like Steve James.
Yeah, which we all do.
Don't watch it if you like Chris Walken.
Or good films. Don't watch it then. So yeah, it's a bizarre little film, and I don't know if I'd ever watch it again.
Probably not, to be honest.
It's odd film.
Yeah. So I also watched Edmond on your suggestion, because I know you were intrigued by this. And,
yes.
I don't know whether you had more time to reflect on it or not. Because like the talent on this film it means it's like I knew there has to be something more than what's on the surface, because when you look at, it's got William H. Macy in it, and this was 2005, so he would have been still pretty, at the height of his career, because he did have a little flurry there, didn't he, in the late 90s, early 2000s. And
yeah, this is hot off the heels of The Cooler with Maria Bello. Yeah,
exactly. Stuart Gordon, naturally, directing of Reanimation From Beyond fame.
And Jeffrey Combs rocks up in it as well, of course.
Yeah. I actually had to go back and find him because I didn't recognize him the first time. David Mamet writing based on his play. It's very, very dark. I think to me, it seemed like it was a lot like Eyes Wide Shut. I think it's a dream story type thing.
Okay.
Because I'm not sure at what point it could be said that he starts dreaming, but it's very similar to Eyes Wide Shut structurally, in the way that he has an argument with his wife early on and then kind of heads out into the night on this kind of odyssey. And and a lot of it is like almost like his fantasies playing out, aren't they? Like when he gets confronted, he'll be confronted by someone, whether it's a mugger or a woman, and always win in some way, like take down the mugger, win over the woman. And also it's got these weird bits where which look like kind of dream images, like the bit where he's just like walking naked through a prison, getting like jeered by the prisoners and stuff. It seems like that's a kind of anxiety dream type thing.
Okay. I didn't take that from it, but that would explain a lot of things about it.
Apparently David Mamet had just gone through a divorce himself, so I don't know whether he was feeling in a particularly cynical mood when he wrote this, because it is very, very cynical, and it seems to be about kind of a wasted life, or the sense of him having wasted his life. And the Julia Stiles bit that you mentioned last time, where he goes into the bar and he is a mess, covered in blood, all bruised, and he starts ranting, going on a massive like racist rant, and then she just jumps into bed with him.
Yeah.
And then not only that, but she starts coming out with her own like horrible, vile, homophobic stuff. But it's almost like it's like that's another. It almost feels like another of his fantasies, really, doesn't it? Because it's like right, suddenly someone is listening to him, and he's got the girl, and she's utterly entranced by his mindless ranting. Um,
But if it was a dream, though,
mm,
he doesn't really come out on top. And that whole, I took it from when she sort of started saying those sort of, it's against homosexuals, isn't it? She starts ranting about.
yes,
I thought that well, that was the point where she realized like how weird he actually is, and she was saying it to kind of just. She was as he's wearing his boxers and brandishing a knife as he's ranting, and I thought her saying those things weren't really what she thought. She was just saying to kind of agree with him to calm him down in the hope that he would leave.
yeah, yeah, because it is a weird one because like if you imagine that as like real life, right? She would not go home with him in the first place. Okay, so you
No.
got that, you got that part. But then as soon as he like got out of bed and yeah, brandished a knife and started ranting about black people and stuff, that would probably be the moment when she'd be like, oh, I might just make a move, to be honest.
Yeah,
Um,
trying to get a groove on, yeah.
if I'm, but I am going to give David Mamet and Stuart Gordon the benefit of the doubt and assume that it is a projection of his own mind, the stuff that's happening, because but it does make it extremely troubling to watch because literally every person he like attacks, whether verbally or physically, is black.
Yes.
Well, except her, obviously, except Julia Stiles, and they're all thugs or pimps or rapists or whatever.
Yeah.
And every woman is just a shrill bitch or young and gagging for it, really. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's sort of like I guess a thinking man's fallen down in a way, but
Yeah. Did you
not
see
quite as
where
much
I
fun as fallen
watched it
down.
and you're like, am I enjoying this?
Yeah,
Like it's
I
just
don't
it's
think.
such
Yeah, I don't think it is a film to enjoy. I think it's a film to reflect upon. It's a really dark film and interesting, I suppose, but deeply unpleasant. Deeply, deeply unpleasant.
yes.
And the ending is just bizarre
Yes.
and
But
quite.
Bucky Woodbine isn't it, so it's fine.
It's very amusing in a way. The ending, but it's probably worth a watch. I think, given that it's only like 80 minutes, and
Yeah, second
yeah,
half, yeah, 80 minutes and
but it is very weird. The only reason why I almost like don't find it just utterly repulsive is the fact that it's David Mamet writing, and I don't believe that he would write something which is to be taken
one
literally.
literal one-dimensional sort
Yeah,
of I'm glad you watched it, and it's interesting to see you took something different from. But yeah, like I said, it's definitely worth a goosey if you haven't seen it. And again, at 80 minutes, you're not really losing much. So, um, I watched Internal Affairs with Richard Gere and Andy Garcia. That rhymed, and this is the one I put on. I think it was Monday night actually. We did the last sort of episode, and I chucked it on very late, and I was surprised by how good it was. So after about 25 minutes, I thought, no, I need to actually focus on this because this is far better than I expected. And yeah, so if people haven't seen it, this is a film. I think it's 1990.
yeah, that would be about right. I think.
And Richard Gere is like a corrupt cop, and
Yeah.
Andy Garcia is sort of a fresh out of the academy, internal affairs detective, and it's just basically him trying to catch Richard Gere out, and it's sort of a really basic premise, but what's so good about it is just how good everyone is in it. So you've got like Nancy Travis plays Andy Garcia's wife, and as he sort of takes on Richard Gere's traits in a bid to take him down. So there's a touch of To Live and Die in LA where you've got a cop who sort of starts out quite wholesome and then kind of gets dragged into the negative side of it and the more seedy side of it, but sort of justifying it to themselves, like the ends justify the means sort of thing. And I really liked it because it's very much a character sort of study, and I really enjoyed that side of it because Richard Gere is like a real piece of shit in that film. Some of the things he says and does. He really knows how to push people's buttons.
Yeah.
And obviously, there's not a single belt in the entire film. Everyone's t-shirts tucked into their jeans, nary a belt in sight. And if they did, there'd be black leather. Don't you worry about that. Yeah. So William Baldwin's in it, obviously good. And it deals with the like I think I mentioned before. I've got a friend who's in the police force, and I've had a few conversations with him where he says that the job, the things you see, and the fact you're dealing with the sort of real bottom of the barrel on a daily basis and seeing the worst in people day in day out, it does
Yeah.
make you cynical and it turns you into a different, possibly more unpleasant person.
Right.
So it's and I thought it captured that really, really well. It reflects the conversations I've had personally with policemen. So I really liked it. Really liked it.
Yeah, I haven't seen this film in like 25 years, so I do need to watch it again.
Yeah.
What's it? Where is it available?
It's on Amazon Prime.
Good, 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 good. It's directed by Mike Figgis. He did Leaving Las Vegas.
Yes. Didn't he do? No, the writer died after leaving Las Vegas, wasn't it? Was it? Mike Figgis is still alive, I guess. Is he?
I think so.
I think it's the writer or the director of Leaving Las Vegas who died. I think it may have been the writer of the book.
Right.
But yeah, that makes sense because I really like Leaving Las Vegas as well. So maybe the tone of them just appeals to me.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
I
I'm
really
gonna
definitely worth a goosey.
definitely gonna check that out. Okay, I'll move then on to Supernatural Forces, aka The Mind's Eye.
Never heard of this.
I think The Mind's Eye is the US title, and it's called Supernatural Forces here in the UK. So if you're looking for it on Prime, then it's called Supernatural Forces. But I probably wouldn't bother looking for it on Prime because it's not very good.
Supernatural Forces is a terrible generic title. At least The Mind's Eye makes it sound slightly cerebral.
Yes, it's not a very cerebral film. This is another Joe Bagos film after Bliss and VFW. I thought he's done other things. He has done other things. He did so he did this, and he did something else before that called Almost Human, apparently in 2013.
So this is pre-Bliss then.
This is pre-Bliss. I'd say that Bliss seems to be the moment when like he starts like finding his mojo, because The Mind's Eye is okay, I suppose. It's set in 1990, so obviously set slightly in the past again. And it's basically this telekinetic guy who looks like Daniel Radcliffe. He's picked up by the police. He can't control his gift, or is it a curse? And like attacks them, sort of thing, with his mind. He's taken in by this kind of mad scientist researcher guy called Slovak, he's developed a drug to kind of subdue telekinesis.
Right.
But he's also doing experiments essentially to become extremely powerful, like the most powerful psychokinetic person. So he gets taken to this place, this kind of institute. Within seconds, he intends to escape. Like he hates it the moment he's there. So he's already trying to escape. And then basically it's really just a series of standoffs, usually involving people standing wide-eyed and vibrating in front of each other.
Did you watch Scanners by accident?
It's got a lot of scanners in it, definitely. There's like a kind of little subgenre, really, isn't there, these sorts of films? And then it's never that interesting to see people really, really straining. It's like the acting all comes down to who can strain hardest. That's all it is.
It's so true. And then they basically just tense up, vibrate, and sweat until there's a little.
Oh, it becomes ridiculous at the end. It's literally them just staring at each other, getting like the veins are popping in their eyes and stuff. It's got some really good practical gore effects. So you get heads exploding, people torn in half and stuff. It's got some really nice synth music. Good. And it has a nice little cameo from Larry Fessenden, which is always welcome.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's always good to see Larry in anything.
There's quite an amusing scene where he cross cuts like a sex scene with the bad guy being injected with a massive needle in the back of his back of his neck, which I thought was quite amusing. And he's kind of like, so obviously you've got the sex, and then in a completely different place, you've got this guy just like kind of, spasming with orgasmic feelings of this needle being jabbed into the back of his neck. It's quite amusing. It's kind of cheap looking, and the performances are very variable. the guy who plays Slovak he just doesn't have any gravitas at all, to the point where they actually just sort of manipulate his voice later on to make him scarier, but he's still not scary. Yeah, so it just really, it's okay. It descends into a lot of shouting and posturing and people explaining the plot while they throw furniture around. Really, it's okay.
Right. And then eventually, yes, just looking at each other and straining.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's straining so hard. Rain's popping out everywhere.
At one point, when there's like the big standoff at the end, and they're both like levitating and vibrating with this suppressed power, and they're straining, and their eyes are twitching, does one of them say, "I have got a nappy on. I have prepared for this level of straining. I will outstrain you, kind sir." Does anyone say that?
No, he does. Maybe just pop into a corner shop to get some cheap panty liners at one point. I didn't really know that for though.
Yeah. Well, the subgenre of men straining in a film is one that I do need to look at. I mean, Scanners.
Yeah.
And what was this called? Supernatural. What a terrible title.
Supernatural Forces. Yeah.
After you've explained it, it's an even worse title.
Yes. I mean, the mind's eye does make sense at least. I don't know why they would change that. Yeah, it's not. It's more of just an excuse for some cool gore, really, which is fine. But if you watch Scanners, I mean, that has got actually, a story behind it and actually some depth. But yeah,
just thinking about obviously when who was also in McBain, obviously when what's it called, the Madness of Richard III was released in America, they had to call it the Madness of King Richard because they were the American audiences would think, oh, we missed the first two films, I'm not watching that one. And maybe like in this way with the title of this film, they said, oh, we better call it in the UK Supernatural Forces and not The Mind's Eye, because otherwise people would think that Dennis Waterman's in it. And so yes, good point actually. We better want to get one of that trap.
Yeah.
Roger Ebert. Dennis Waterman wasn't in sight for the 2 hours I sat there.
Roger Ebert saying that as well. Not even British.
Red Dragon. This was a weird one. Red Dragon. I didn't realize it was effectively a remake. Yes, for a start, Brett Ratner. When that name flew up on the screen, I thought, "Oh no. I was going to watch this." And obviously, I didn't realize it was kind of a retelling of the story of Manhunter. Because I think the problem is, I watch these films like Red Dragon and Manhunter. I've watched them probably about 2 or 3 times each over the years, and they're completely molded together in my head, and I keep on taking parts, but the sort of beats of the story are the same in each one. Yeah. I think I want to watch Manhunter again. I'll probably watch it with you because I know you're a huge fan of it. But considering Brett Ratner was in this, directed this, I actually really enjoyed it because, again, I mixed this up in my head with Hannibal, with Julianne Moore, and
and Ray Liotta.
And I think that's the worst one.
Yeah.
It's really unpleasant. It's the worst one. So with Red Dragon, I mean, the cast, you've got Harvey Keitel, Ed Norton, Ralph Fiennes, who is terrifying in that film. He is so threatening. The sequence with Philip Seymour Hoffman, when he wakes up and he is in his kegs and he is literally glued to a chair, and Ralph Fiennes comes in and he says, I'm going to show you my transformation. And the thing is, the whole thing about him being obsessed with this Red Dragon painting and constantly talking about morphing and transforming into like another being, in other hands, it could have just been like, oh, shut up, Rafe. But he is so it's so intense in the way he delivers his lines. And the bit where he turns around and drops his like bathrobe and you see the tattoo. And when Philip Seymour Hoffman, the way he juggles this kind of kaleidoscope of emotions of, first of all, kind of, what's the word? Like humoring him almost, like thinking he can talk his way out of it. And then that fails. And then he's trying to work it out. And the kind of roller coaster of emotions he goes through in that like brief scene when he realizes that he can't get out of this, and the absolute fear and dread is amazing.
It's a really interesting part, that, isn't it, of the reporter, because of course Stephen Lang played him in Manhunter, and again it was such a standout part. It's because it's quite a small part really, but quite vital, And yeah, so it sounds like he made an impact as well. Because I started watching Red Dragon once, but I just couldn't get through. I couldn't get past like 20 minutes because I wasn't quite in the mood for the particularly flashy style of editing that it was displaying. But if you're saying it's good and worth it and worth watching for the Tooth Fairy himself, then I may well give it a go.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because it never feels, it never kind of escalates out of control. It never just gets really. Obviously, at the very end, there's a build up to, to a sort of sequence, but a lot of it is just them just trying to work it out, and I quite like that it felt quite
Yes.
methodical, because
Well, yeah, that's what I loved about Manhunt. I loved the procedural aspect of it, where they're trying to work out, what's written on the toilet roll and stuff like that. I just think it's really cool. It's just
yeah,
really interesting.
and the home movies, yeah, and the way, and it feels quite nice, and the way that it all kind of comes together, and everyone sort of plays their part. But yeah, Ray Fiennes, he really stood up for me because, of course, a lot of the action, just by the sort of the way, the point of the film is that it's all happening off screen, and they're trying to solve these murders. And then when you do see the Tooth Fairy, you do see him actually committing the crime. You don't just see the sort of aftermath of it, and it has such an impact. You think, yeah, they really need to slow him down, really.
He needs to put the brakes on here.
Yeah, and then slam the brakes on and say, "Can I speak to you for a minute, Mr. Fairy?"
I think part of my reluctance to watch Red Dragon over the years has been it's not so much the Brett Ratner thing, really. It's the fact that I think that the original film, flawed though it was, like the casting was so brilliant that these people are kind of drilled into my mind. So obviously you've got William Peterson, who's amazing. You got Tom Noonan. You got Dennis Farina. You got Brian Cox, and I can't imagine other people stepping into their shoes. But from the sounds of it, they do all right.
I don't. Again, I will say I don't have as much of a connection to Manhunter because I saw Red Dragon first, and then I saw Manhunter afterwards. So, but then they quite happily sit together in my mind, if you know what I mean. But yeah, I can imagine if you are really attached, because it is effectively a rehash of that. You basically may as well just choose the one you want.
Yeah. Is this on Prime?
Yes, Amazon Prime.
Good.
Or possibly Netflix. Possibly Netflix, actually.
Okay. But it's one or the other. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I might give it a go then. Yeah.
It'd be interesting just to see if you can make it through. I didn't notice the editing. The edit didn't, which was good because I was waiting for something to piss me off because of Brett Ratner, but it never did.
Who plays the girlfriend of the Tooth Fairy, the blind lady?
Oh, I know her name. I think
because again, it was Joan Allen in Manhunter, and that's when I fell in love with her. I fell in love with William Peterson and Joan Allen in the same movie.
It's Emily something.
Mortimer?
Emily Watson.
Watson. Ah, right, yeah. Oh yeah, I can see that. She's very good.
She is really good. Yeah.
Okay, good. So I continued my little Joel Schumacher-a-thon with A Time to Kill.
Oh, right, okay.
Which unbelievably is the same writer and director as Batman and Robin. So it's Akiva Goldsman and Joel Schumacher. And this is a really kind of dark, grim. I guess it's
dark and grim and yet oddly sentimental.
Sort of. I mean, it's sentimental elements to it, but most of the time it stays pretty just actually harsh and grim. Really, it's set.
Matthew McConaughey is sweating in this film.
Everyone is dripping with sweat constantly in this film. Like it's not even like movie sweat where it's like you can see droplets. It's like that kind of sheen of sweat that you genuinely get in a hot place.
Yeah.
So it's a courtroom drama about basically what happens is a guy, Samuel L. Jackson plays a guy whose 10-year-old daughter is attacked by just these white thug wankers, basically, who attack her, beat her up, rape her, and then lynch her. Nice. And basically Samuel L. Jackson, they get caught and they're on the way and they're on their way to be tried in court, and Samuel L. Jackson guns them down basically. So it's the courtroom part is about whether he is gonna what kind of he's gonna be sentenced for basically. Is it murder? Is it manslaughter? And what's going to happen to him? Because will he get the death penalty sort of thing for what he did? And it seems like an impossible mission sort of thing. And but it's well made, and Matthew McConaughey's very good in it. Sandra Bullock rocks up. She's also good. And given that Joel Schumacher, well, he must have made this between Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, and he keeps this kind of stylistic flourishes mostly under wraps. I mean, there are a few scenes where you're wondering why someone doesn't just turn on the light, but it looks atmospheric. And it's good performance from Matthew McConaughey. This was his kind of period of pre-rom-com period of Amistad and Contact and stuff like that. Samuel L. Jackson's probably the standout in terms of the performances, though. He's really good in it. I think the only real disappointment is that you don't have any scenes really between him and his family. I mean, I don't think his wife gets a single line. In fact, I'm not sure that any black people get lines in this film, which is kind of ironic, given that the whole subject matter, and really, I mean, Samuel L. Jackson's big speech at the end is about white people empathizing with black people and not just treating them as a kind of a whole separate as a separate part of society, but actually empathizing with them and engaging with them. It's pretty fast moving. There are some ridiculously far-fetched moments, like where someone plants a bomb under Matthew McConaughey's house. A KKK plant a bomb under his house, and he goes to disarm it, and when he can't disarm it, he just lobs it into the air and it explodes. It's quite ridiculous.
It's weird that you should say when you said the plot is fast moving. That seems quite a good thing, because the problem with some courtroom dramas, I look at you, the Pelican Brief.
Oh my god!
Is that they're just glacial?
Yeah, but it's one of those things where almost every scene there's quite a remarkable incident sort of thing. So it does keep barreling along pretty fast, and it has it's pretty well written. I mean, there's a good final speech, which kind of it's very much in the kind of tradition of like Gregory Peck in To Kill a Mockingbird, or indeed Kevin Costner in JFK. So you get this good quality big speech at the end. And it is obviously, sadly, still relevant, especially when Samuel L. Jackson talks about how there's this kind of binary division in American society between blacks and whites. It's not as nuanced as Just Mercy, which I think we talked about a few weeks ago.
I was going to say, you happen to have in the last few episodes with the current sort of social climate. You've watched these sort of films, and I know this one was Joel Macker, but has that been an actual? Have you sort of seeked them out?
Not specifically, no, I don't think so. This one was just because it was Joel Schumacher, and I happened to have seen Flatliners and Falling Down too recently too, so I thought I'd give this a go. But and Just Mercy was literally because they were offering it for free through Microsoft Store as part of the Black Lives Matter thing. So it's not as nuanced as Just Mercy, but it is still a pretty good, intelligent mainstream movie. Yeah, it's worth watch.
The next film I watched isn't as good as the film you just mentioned. It's a film with Aaron Eckhart in called Line of Duty. Now, you may have seen this advertised on Netflix.
Oh my god, I started watching this.
I watched the whole thing, Rupert, and I'm here to help. Okay, I am here to say.
I think we need to set up a group so that people can just talk about this.
I really like, fancy Aaron Eckhart. Although he is starting to look, starting to get a touch of the Jeremy Renner as he gets older. Like his face appears to be imploding, but he is a good man and a good actor, and I do like him as a presence. He is a cop in this, and what happens is at the start of the film, he's going through a bit of a marital problem with his wife. It's shown that he's kind of fit, and he's kind of a very much a cop on the street, banter with like the sort of street kids and stuff, very amiable kind of guy. And he chases down. There's like someone running down the street effectively, and they say it's part of like a sting operation, like leave this guy alone. But he just takes off in pursuit. There's quite a cool foot chase that takes up the first, I would say, like fifth of the film, which is fine.
Yeah.
And the guy, he catches the guy in an alley, and the guy basically just forces him to Aaron Eckhart to shoot him and kill him. And then his commissioner sort of says, "You dick," because what they've done is they've kidnapped my daughter, and we were trying to get information on how to get her back, and now you've just shot our only lead, sort of thing. So what happens then? Aaron Eckhart basically goes, "Oh, sorry," and he's just completely distraught. And they find footage of the daughter, and she is being drowned in underground, or they say underground. She's being drowned in some sort of container, really slowly. And she's got 60. They've got 64 minutes to find out where she is before she drowns. Right?
Yeah. So let me just stop you there, because
Please
from
do.
that description so far, it sounds like a pretty good movie. The thing about it's pretty solid. Doesn't seem like there's any element that could possibly turn it into a really, really cringe-worthy, zeitgeisty movie.
May I continue? so,
Go on.
So, you think, yes, Aaron Eckhart is not the star in enough films for my liking. I first kind of became hip steep in him in like a film called Thursday with Thomas Jane in, I think it was 1998, and then in The Rum Diary. And I was like, oh my God, I know he's in his early 50s.
Yeah.
An action film, Race Against Time, Aaron Eckhart, give me the popcorn and shut everyone's mouth.
Thank You for Smoking was the one which made me fall in love with him. So that,
I
yes,
haven't seen that one.
very good. Yeah.
So I'm thinking, here we go, boom. But then what happens is, he obviously just goes off to try and find clues about where this girl's being held, because he finds his responsibility to find her. And
he
he's
goes rogue, doesn't he?
yes. And then two of the most irritating women I've ever seen in or outside of television just take up a lot of screen time. So what happens is it cuts, and I think when they were talking, I just said to Faye, Jesus Christ, stop talking. It cuts to them, and they're in this sort of New York warehouse, and we have this like live streaming thing, this unfiltered news. We don't give the bullshit. We just say it how it is, and it's just these two extremely attractive young women in their 20s, and they talk in tech speak. Like when they say goodbye, they say XOXO and like megalols and all this sort of stuff. They basically talk like no one in the world does.
Yeah, it was dating before my very eyes.
Yeah, and they're doing this thing where they do this like live thing where they introduce each other to this, like, obviously these thousands of followers they've got, and they just come across as complete wankers, and I thought, oh my God, I'm really glad they're out of the film. No. But what happens is, one of them it happens to be filming Aaron Eckhart, like, around the shooting sort of thing, and she's trying to sort of talk to him about stuff. And she finds out what's actually going on that the public don't know, and then she follows him around for the entire film with a camera on a gimbal, on a Dr. Richard gimbal, and he doesn't just say go away. He doesn't just take a phone off it and smash it on the floor and then actually star in a good film.
It was a real problem for me. This,
yeah,
like not only is it really annoying because she's really annoying, not only is it completely implausible, but also, why, if he is trying to, like, he's working on his own. It's not like he's working with a squad of people. It's not like he should be having shared information or anything like that. So he's already up against it. So then he decides to have this girl follow him around, live streaming everything, yes, and as he explains where he's going to next, sort of thing. So it's like, well,
you've stumbled across a bit of a plot hole there, haven't you? Because what this means is, if you think about it, It's a tiny spoiler, but basically the story boils down to only like one or two people being involved as the criminals. But at the start, all they know is the commissioner's daughter's been kidnapped. They got an hour to find her. They don't know how big this criminal circle is, what they're going to ask for, if it's politically motivated. They've no idea. So live streaming, the only man who can do anything to stop this is every move. Just gives them. If it was like a huge, like a syndicate of criminals, they would just watch it on telly, and then if
Yeah.
they got too close, they just kill her, and that would be it.
Yeah. It's like I can literally see where he is at this very moment. He's coming in
Yeah.
through the door. Let's shoot him as he
Let,
comes
let,
up the
let's
stairs.
just shoot it. So that is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And also the quipping dialogue between Aaron Eckhart and the girl was so bad that it was at the level of Pete Postlethwaite's character in Mystery Men, where someone would say something and the other person would just say the opposite. Like there's a bit of what it happens about 8 or 9 times where obviously he's old and she's young, so hilarity ensues. And there's lines like he'll say something and she'll say, "Was that a compliment?" And then he'll say, huh, "Don't get used to it." And then a moment later, she'll say a compliment to him and he'll say, "Was that a compliment?" And she'll say, "Yeah, get used to it." It's that level. And
Yeah.
I paused it at one point because I thought, this is so irritating and so against what this film could have been, like a really like funky thriller, that I went online. I thought, has this been written by an old man trying to be cool? Because there's no
Yeah.
way. And I went online, and yeah, the writer is a dude in his 50s, but the director is a young guy in his early 30s. So what you're left with is like quite a kinetic, like modern sense of direction, but then really, really, really clunky writing
Yeah.
of someone trying to talk like a young girl and having no concept of it.
Yeah.
It's the most irritating film I've seen in a very long time.
I couldn't watch after. I got about halfway through, and we got about halfway through, and you just said, like, I think what got to me most was just it seemed tonally just wrong, given the subject matter, which was kind of it starts off with like this kind of police shooting, this dubious police shooting, and I thought, I figured it was going to be about how difficult it is to be a policeman and making those split-second decisions and stuff. I thought it was going to take it seriously, but then it turned into this really unfunny, like buddy cop thriller.
The problem is as well is that at the start, up until the shooting and after, when he meets the girl, his character is put across as like, yes, he's kind of a bit of a broken hero. Like he's obviously his marriage has failed behind him.
Yeah.
He's a nice guy, but he's obviously deeply flawed, and he's in these awkward positions, and he's quite morose when he's by himself.
Yeah.
But then they're hunting down. They're trying to find this poor innocent girl who's being drowned alive, and he is quipping. He's making jokes, and you think this is not. I'm not getting any sense of threat here, and I don't. It's like no one's taking it seriously. And every now and again, it'll cut back to the girl's other partner who's kind of watching the live stream and giving them clues as to where to go next.
Yeah.
And she is literally like, whenever something happens, she's like, "Oh hell no!" And she'll like literally stand up and like move away from his screen and really, really ham it up and overact. And you think, just shut up, and don't be in the film, please.
That's the problem, isn't it? Because if it was a case of like these two people were forced together and they had to work together, which is usually the case in these buddy films, then it's understandable why they would reluctantly get along and kind of gradually get to know each other. But the problem here is that there's absolutely no reason why he should have her along on any level.
No reason, just for his own comfort, but also just the practicality of what they're trying to achieve is just really dangerous. Yeah, and there's a kind of an overall message of like connectivity and being connected, and community can be a force for good. Right. But it's wrapped up in such an uninteresting and tedious film that it's just not worth watching.
Yes. Bad.
So yeah,
okay.
bad and more so irritating film.
Right. So I'm not going to watch the second half of that.
No.
Okay. I watched the Gladiator, not the Ridley Scott film.
I was going to say
Gladiator. Right. This was a film that Abel Ferrara made for TV in the mid-80s. Obviously. It's about a guy whose little brother is killed by a dangerous driver. So Big Brother, basically he goes out in his car and in his kind of pimped up car and spends his time running crazies and under the influence people off the road so they can't hurt other people.
Right.
So it's kind of Death Wish meets Road Warrior, which of course sounds cool, but in
Where was
reality,
it set? Sorry, 'cause this is New York. He made his films in New York, didn't he? Before I was.
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
it's yeah. Although actually, I mean, it seems like a lot of the kind of car footage was done on kind of empty roads outside the city.
Oh,
So
oh.
yeah, in reality, yeah. So kind of as a concept, it sounds quite exciting, but in reality, it's really quite boring. There's a lot of scenes of him fixing engines and bolting stuff onto his car. Um, and the car stunts themselves aren't particularly impressive. It one thing I mentioned Death Wish, and I know we've had our discussions about Death Wish before.
Yeah.
Now, I kind of like how it does start off right as this kind of unapologetic vigilante film, but then gradually it does actually start to highlight the limitations and drawbacks of vigilantism. Basically, for example, there's a scene where he like runs down a speeding driver, stops him, gets out ready to kind of kill him, basically, and then he discovers that the driver of the car is actually someone's husband taking his pregnant wife, rushing his pregnant wife to hospital, and that's why he was speeding. So I think,
Right.
so it does address that stuff, and in the end, once he's kind of got his revenge successfully, it's not like the cops just let him go, sort of thing. He's left this trail of destruction, and the film does, to its credit, leave us in no doubt that kind of vigilantism isn't a useful approach to these sorts of things. So it's kind of laudable in a way, in the same way that Bad
Is there
Lieutenant.
anyone in this film that we would know?
Oh, there's no one. There's no one. There was one actor I recognized from other Abel Ferrara films, but I have no idea what his name is. So it kind of laudable in the same way that Bad Lieutenant was, where it's like it starts out quite nasty and he does nasty things, but ultimately it is quite there's quite a turnaround at the end, if you see what I mean. Sort of sense of redemption, but also a sense that he hasn't just gotten away with it. The problem is it's just not very exciting to watch, and the editing is so bad. It looks literally like it was cut with scissors. It's staggering. Like some bits, the music, when the music just suddenly stops when it cuts and stuff. It's just awful. And the main actor guy is just awful. So,
when you described that, I was quite thinking, this could be
yeah,
film sorted.
I was really hoping it would be something, like a bit of quality grindhouse, but no, sadly not.
I mean, like that in Cars, where it would be like really nasty and meshy and rusty, but no.
But with a cool, like, redemptive twist at the end. But no, Nancy Allen rocks up, so that's always nice. But again, as she so often was, she's kind of wasted on just like the bleeding heart girlfriend type role. So yeah.
Another Nancy. Funny enough, I thought that Nancy Travis in what was that film called? Internal Affairs, who plays Andy Garcia's wife, and she's got the saddest puppy dog eyes I've ever seen, and this keening furrowed brow every time, and that's kind of what Nancy Allen. It's the curse of the Nancy, effectively.
The Nancy look.
Yeah, even Jack Nance used to do it.
So that's The Gladiator by Abel Ferrara.
Not going to watch it again.
No, I don't think it's really worth it. I mean, Abel Ferrara, he's an interesting director. Like, whenever I watch his films, he always brings something a little bit fresh to them. Like, he'll make they appear quite generic, but then there'll always be some fresh twist on them. So it's never quite what it seems when you first start watching it.
Another film that is, again, just something I'll never watch and pretty throwaway is Acts of Vengeance with Antonio Banderas. This is a film from within the last 5 or 6 years, I think. And
you're on a bit of an Antonio Banderas kind of trip at the moment, aren't you?
Yes, and this podcast starts with me. Well, actually, 2 podcasts ago, it started with me watching Black Butterfly on an Antonio Banderas trip. But this podcast will end with me on very much a journey to the heart of Dennis Farina. Don't you worry about that. Antonio Banderas is a lawyer who is kind of a hard-working lawyer who gets makes a living with his mouth. He's fast talking, and he basically works for pretty dodgy criminals, unwittingly, but just gets people off, on technicalities, so they can go back out and do naughty things, the little tinkers. And he is working late one night, and his daughter's got like a talent show in a school, and he's late for it, and his wife and daughter end up getting murdered, and he blames himself, and he throws himself into this kind of underground fighting ring, not to win or to fight for any reason. He's obviously completely minted, but just as a way of sort of suffering. He just basically drinks and makes just purposefully loses fights and just gets really badly beaten up in these underground fighting rings as a sort of a form of penance for his actions of not being there. And then what happens then is he realizes that that's not really achieving anything, so he decides to try and solve the murder because the police aren't particularly interested. Obviously, the police officer's Jonathan Shesh. And they're like, oh yeah, we're doing as best we can. Carl Urban rocks up and says, oh, your case has gone cold, so you need to, he just takes matters into his own hands effectively. And the way he takes matters into his own hands, I was saying last week about how Antonio Banderas has got a beautiful, lilting, rich, expressive voice that's like can really the entire rainbow of emotions can be from like some beautiful sort of loving whispering to like really guttural angry rage, and he can do all of that with his voice. Well, obviously the way in this film he decides to avenge his family is by taking a vow of silence and not speaking. So he just doesn't speak, and then he claims that his hearing is almost superhumanly accurate after that, which helps him precisely once in the entire film when someone cocks a gun behind him and he hears it.
But I'd probably hear that.
Can you imagine, Rupert, if you will, if you close your eyes for a moment and imagine trying to solve a mystery of who murdered your family by tracking down people and then actively not speaking to them?
Hey,
so just
you're really putting up obstacles, aren't you?
Yeah. So yeah, not only is it like an uninteresting thing to sort of sit through, but it actively hinders his own investigation. So yeah, it's and the whole film then is him just basically tracking down who killed his family and why, and it's baffling, to be honest. The whole there's scene after scene of people saying, Tony, do you know what happened to them? Do you want to help? Tony,
what reason does he give for not speaking? Like, because I can understand the bit about the self-destructive part about getting into fights and stuff.
He finds a book. Is it? Funnily enough, it ties back into the Gladiator, not that one. Marcus Aurelius.
Right. Okay.
He sees a girl who's like 12 or 13 years old, and she's a prostitute, and he says, come on, let's take you home, kind of thing. This is before his vow of silence, obviously. Otherwise, he would have just gestured at her pathetically. Like gesturing,
that could be misconstrued.
Zipping his trousers up and puckering off.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's and then the pimp comes up the van and she, because she's afraid of a pimp more than she's afraid of him, she stabs him in the leg, and to staunch the blood, he picks up a book from a bookshop as he's going past it, and it's Marcus Aurelius. I don't know what it's called, I forget. But the film is split into chapters, and each chapter is like a sort of a quote from the book, and one of them is that you should never really speak, or whatever it is. It's nonsense. It's not interesting. It's just
the book was called
real contrivance.
Shut Up.
Yeah, it's called Shut Up, Tony. He's like, oh, that's very specific. So yeah, it's total nonsense. And even at the end, when whatever happens, and the film comes to a resolution, even then, no, he's still not talking. It's still just a slightly awkward final scene where he gets in the car and someone sort of asks him if he's okay, and he just stares straight ahead. And you're like, okay, you're keeping that up here. That's not going to get boring fast. So yeah, it's just a really generic film, and the way it just kind of wraps up, it's just generic.
So the only time that, it doesn't come in useful at all, not speaking, because although, yeah, he might claim that it helps his hearing. I mean, there's nothing scientific behind that at all, is there? I mean, that's just not true, is it?
No, not at all. He buffs up, and there are certain parts of his book where he tries to get to the peak of perfection, sort of thing, where he buffs up and he tones up, so he's much more capable of fighting and stuff. And I suppose what it is, it's a flip of how when he was a lawyer and he made his living through talking and caused all these problems through talking, then if he just shuts up, he'll be able to
just say different things, though, couldn't you?
Yeah, you could just not talk as much. So, and there's a scene at the start of the film, actually, where I sort of said, right, where he's doing a voiceover and says, women on average a day say 20,000 words, and men a day say like, I think it's like 80,000 or whatever it is, or like 30,000. And he says 80,000 words a day. And then he says, but when I come home, only three of those words mean anything. And yes, it's when he says, I love you to his daughter.
Yeah.
And I thought, you're a solicitor, Tony. You probably say lots of things every day that are very important to a lot of people, to be honest. It's probably just not, I love you. If you went around saying, I love you to everyone, you'd probably lose your job,
Yeah.
to be honest.
It'd be funny if that was the twist, that he could only say the words "I love you," but he had to like say them in different ways in order to like express himself differently to different people. So like if he really hated someone, it's like "I love you," and it's like really aggressive.
Yeah,
that's
and
all he could
she's
say.
like, when he goes into a diner and they say, "Do you want a special? Do you want fries with it, or do you want hash browns?" And then he's like, "Oof, I love you." That's it. And they're like, "Oh, I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you're getting at."
I might as well just say nothing at all then. This isn't
Yeah,
working.
I might just like pop his bottom lip out and shrug, and she's like, I'll just give you a fries then." Yeah, it's just it's a film that thinks it's much cooler than it actually is.
It seems very, yeah, that's quite an
Yeah.
affectation, really, isn't it? The whole.
Yeah, it doesn't work in the context of the film at all.
No, I mean, if there was some reason behind it, then fine. But I'm not convinced that there is a reason from what you said.
It's
Yeah.
a contrivance, it is.
What's it called, and where can we see it again?
This is Acts of Vengeance, and it is on Amazon Prime.
Also on Amazon Prime is Kill and Kill Again. This is a sequel to a film I'll never see called
Kill.
It's called Kill or Be Killed.
Oh, right, okay.
It's a South African martial arts movie, naturally. It's a person called James Ryan. He's tasked with rescuing a kidnapped scientist. This scientist discovered a mind control drug when researching potatoes, and now he's being held by a crazy warlord, wearing a fake beard, naturally, who is trying to create a new kind of communist superstate called New Babylonia. So they have to go down there, get the scientists back before this guy uses the mind control drug to create this thing. Yeah, and then come out. So he gets so James Ryan gets his squad together, and they're quite distinctive, different people in his squad of like 4 or 5. There's one guy who's like really mystical, and it's really, really creepy because he'll float across the floor towards them. He doesn't, almost like he's just moving his toes very quickly. It's really creepy. So that's quite cool. There's some yokel from a caravan park who's just like kind of just a bruiser. There's a guy called Hot Dog, who they find this is where they find him. They find him in a warehouse, right? Playing a game for money with a load of these like just drunk guys. But basically the game involves they load a gun, right? Load a pistol, and then all make their bets, and they throw the pistol up into the air or at the wall, and they're taking bets on who, if anyone, will take the ricocheting bullet as it comes out the gun. So it's just randomly shooting people, just hurling this gun into the air. It's astonishing. Anyway, the final
I'll
guy.
just Super Mario Brothers 3 on the NES, to be honest.
There's the final guy is a Jamaican guy, and his name is Gorilla. It is racist.
Right.
He is referred to as an animal. They go on about how they took him from a zookeeper and stuff. Like he goes on a plane, right? Because they're on the plane on the way to this bloody get this dictator. Because on the plane, and he's so like animalistic that he wants to go to the toilet, so he just smashes down the toilet door and rips it off his hinges, because he's so animalistic.
Does it explain why it sounds like there's just something like wrong with him, like to do stuff.
Yeah, just sounds like he's got like learning difficulties or something.
Yeah.
But no, it's all done for laughs.
Oh,
and
right.
guess what? It's not funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of fight scenes. Some of the fighting moves are quite impressive. Not completely without an imagination, but it's shot in a very dull, flat way.
How old is this one? Sorry.
I want to say maybe late 70s or very early 80s.
Right. Okay. Not kind of
81.
the racism and the profiling, but
Yeah.
at least right. In my head, it was like a modern thing, and I was.
Yeah, I don't know what was going on in South Africa at that time, but I'm pretty sure things were pretty segregated as far as blacks and whites were concerned. But the fight scenes, they don't feel visceral, they feel arranged. You know, when you're watching like a martial arts film and it looks like they're shooting a rehearsal, rather than the real thing. It doesn't look like anyone's really hitting each other and stuff. But the action is non-stop. It's 100 minutes long, and do me a favor, that's ridiculous for a film like this. 100 minutes. It shouldn't be breaching 80, really. And there's never any sense of peril. They just kick everyone's ass that they come across.
Is it trashy fun?
I think if it weren't for the racist element, I'd be a lot more forgiving, because it clearly knows it's ridiculous and it has no problem with that. So it's got a sense of its own stupidity. Like there's a bit there's this bit early on where Hot Dog steals a bunch of drawing pins from a shop or something like that, and you don't know why he does it. And then in the middle of a fight later on, like as he's being beaten up, he gets the drawing pins out of his pocket, chucks them on the ground, and like the guy he's attacking him like steps on the drawing pins and like falls over. It's quite cartoony. The warlord element of it, with his fake beard, I mean, it's quite amusing the way that he has this sort of harem of women around him, and yet he's got this like really, really aggressive wife, who who's constantly putting him in his place, and she'll come in and like he'll make a big speech or something, and then she'll like start calling him cute names like Angel Face and Pumpkin Pie in front of all his goons, so to really undermine him. That's quite funny. There is a woman in the group and she can hold her own in fights, so that's good. But it's a bit like a kind of Bruce Lee A-Team, really. It's kind of non-violent and cartoony enough for kids, but then you wouldn't want to show it to a child because then you'd have a lot to explain with regard to how they treat this black man.
And is there any kind of two-way street where does the guy who plays the gorilla, does he kind of?
Oh no,
no, nothing.
I mean, he's yeah. Yeah. I mean,
is it the same cast from obviously the original I've never seen or even heard
I guess
of?
so. I guess so. I don't know. It's just about. It's probably too long to just chuck on, sort of thing, because it shouldn't be that long. But I guess in terms of it has got enough amusing characters in it, and like they are distinctive enough that there's some fun to be had, I guess. But it's very cheaply made. So probably not worth it. Extremely dated, but
I may watch that just out of curiosity if I'm tired one night, because it's one of those films I wouldn't care if I fell asleep halfway through it, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, it's probably just good. I think the 100 minutes thing is a problem just because that's made up with 2 or 3 fights which just don't need to be in it at all. Like 10 minutes of fighting which just doesn't need to be there. It could be much tautier and more efficient.
I also a good one this time. I watched for the very first time, unbelievably, Midnight Run. With Rob Neer and Charles Grodin, and I really liked it. It's one of those films that I've always seen, but I've always kind of talked myself out of watching for no real reason. And then I eventually started to watch it, and I just thought it's so good because it's a weird one because it's an action comedy and it's amusing all the way through. It's never like probably once or twice I actually kind of laughed out loud, but it's so sort of weirdly good-natured and and it's so believable in the interplay between the characters and how and just so fun that it's not about like belly laughs. It's just about a quality that sustains itself for the full 2 hours.
Yes, it's I thought tonally it's spot on.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see where they're effectively just two good men in a very unusual situation, kind of making the best of it. And usually in these films, these road trips, there's no point really talking about the plot 'cause everyone kind of knows a Midnight Run is, but it never kind of. Usually there's a moment in films like this where it's like mismatched buddies or whatever, where someone will either do something that's really questionable and it kind of throws the whole tone off,
Mm.
or it's like it'll just get really really zany and ridiculous.
Yeah.
But this really just keeps it normal, keeps it on an even keel until the
Yeah.
very end.
Quite grounded, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and I found that as it kind of come to the sort of resolution of the plot, I thought, how is this going to end? Actually, I genuinely, because I thought this surely one of them is going to have to suffer this whole situation where they got like the FBI closing in, the mob, each other's personal pride and stuff. And the way it resolved, I thought, oh, that's actually quite nice. It was actually, and
Yeah.
it didn't feel cheap. It was a really, and I'm not used to enjoying films up to the end.
Yes. Well, I think it's because of the good characterization of Papa and thing, and of course, I mean, good performances as well. A rare case of Robert De Niro being good in a comedy film as well. Although
Yeah.
it's not really an out-and-out comedy, is it? Because it's the same guy who did Beverly Hills Cop, which is also another one where it's essentially grounded and things that are happening in it are serious, and yet it's got a real lightness of touch, which makes it very watchable. So it's the
Yes.
same kind of tone. Yeah.
So yeah, nothing. I just wanted to say that it's a bloody good film, and if you like road movies, and I think there's a lot of road movies tend to be more family oriented. They're either really family oriented, like you got stuff like, God, what's the ones with like junk, like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and stuff like that, or you've got ones that are much more gritty and adult, where you go the other way then and have stuff like oh God, what's that one? Like true romance, not true romance, natural born
True
killers,
Romance.
things like that.
Yeah.
But then this just felt like it was kind of because apart from like the constant bad language, nothing really nasty in it. There's no
No.
like okay they say the F word a few times, quite a few times, but it's not an unpleasant film. It's actually quite a it's not like
Yeah.
it relies on like horrible violence or horrendous caricatures of people. And of course Dennis Farina is in it, and this is what made me realize because there's the scenes when he's talking to Philip Baker Hall, or as I call him, the dad from Dirty Dancing, and he's just like saying "shut the fuck up, Sydney," and kind of and just really sort of machine gun kind of conversations at all of his goons. And then there's a scene when he finally gets hold of Charles Grodin and he leans in and threatens him and his wife. And I just thought, God, Dennis Farina is really good at this.
Yeah.
He is
Yeah.
really good at this, and that's what set me off on my
Mm.
odyssey for the next film we'll talk about. But after you, but
Yes.
yeah,
Midnight Run. It's high quality, fun entertainment for adults, which is surprisingly rare because usually it will just become extremely violent or unpleasant if it's
yes,
for adults sort of thing. But it's just smart, It's just a well written, exciting comedy thriller, really, isn't it?
yeah, and it feels weirdly even now if you watch it. Obviously, it was what 1987, 1988.
Yeah.
I've never seen it before, and it felt fresh. And the kind of
Yes.
the twists in the plot, they didn't feel telegraphed at all.
Yeah.
And obviously John Ashton is in it, another tie into Beverly Hills Cop. But I didn't feel cheapened at all by it, and I didn't think, oh yeah, this has been done. It's effectively like one of the best kind of road movie films.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So and
Really.
I
Yeah.
I
Really
would I would
surprised by how good it was.
yeah, I would say like I wish I'd seen it before, but it's actually been like because I do love that genre, and it's been a real treat to discover something like that. It felt like a real like lost little gem to me personally. So Midnight Run,
Yes.
very good.
It
Gets a
is the
thumbs
kind
up,
of film that could slip through the gaps and be forgotten. You
especially
know.
because now when you think of Robert De Niro in a comedy, because he's basically
Yeah.
shoved his career up his ass.
Yeah.
So you just think, oh, do I want to watch that? But no, he actually was really good in comedies at one point, guys.
Yeah. I think the key is for him not to be an out and out comedies. I'm looking at you, Meet the Parents. Right then. So let's move on to Terminal Force. So what was Midnight Run on? Was that on Prime?
Yes, it was.
Terminal Force is on Prime as well, and I've no idea why it's called Terminal Force. The US title is Galaxis, which is it makes even less sense. Anyway, for a low budget mid-90s like sci-fi thriller with Bridget Nielsen and Craig Fairbrass, it's surprisingly okay.
All right.
Well, sort of just below average sort of thing. So the prologue shows Bridget Nielsen's colony on another planet under attack, and it's quite like big scale. I mean, there's a lot of explosions and stuff. It's like it's not short on budget. So there's some dude, bad guy, looking for their sacred crystal, and a bit of a spoiler, but Craig Fairbrass is like a kind of leader of the resistance here, and the bad guy kills Craig Fairbrass, and as he dies, he reveals to Bridget Nielsen there's a second crystal on another planet. Guess what? It's on Earth.
Really?
Unfortunately, there is no kind of fish out of water stuff when Bridget Nielsen comes to Earth, because I was looking forward to that. But
I would not be looking forward to
that. So it cuts to Earth, and this kind of klutz called Jed, played by someone called John H. Brennan.
Is this a comedy?
Well, he has the other crystal, right? So it's not really a comedy, no. But it's kind of like it's meant to be kind of, well, it's meant to be quite a light-ish fantasy sci-fi action movie. I guess in a similar vein to something like Masters of the Universe,
right?
Something like that. So anyway, they're chased around the place by there's gangsters after this guy Jed, and of course there's the bad dude from the other planet who's after Bridget Nielsen. So, and if he gets both the crystals, then he can control the universe or something like that. So yeah, basically it's Bridget Nielsen protecting this klutz from gunfire and magic spells. Really, it's quite well made, and it is fast paced. But some of the special effects are a little bit, yeah.
I'm guessing this was like what, early 90s then, late 80s?
It was early to mid 90s, maybe 94, 95.
Oh, see, that's dangerous.
I know. The script is just derivative of everything you've ever seen. It kind of plays out like Terminator for kids in a way. There's even a bit where like the bad guy storms into a police station and takes everyone down.
Sounds vaguely familiar.
It's kind of good-natured and light-hearted. It's no worse than Master of the Universe, to be honest, but that's not really saying much.
Is Frank Langella in it?
Sadly not. Apparently, I didn't Cyborg.
Yes.
The Albert Pian film.
Are you going to say
of course,
the sets were massive? Yeah.
Well, I always knew that the sets from Master of the Universe were reused for Cyborg, but what I didn't realize was that there was actually going to be a sequel to Master of the Universe called Master of the Universe Cyborg, subtitle Cyborg, and
really?
yeah, and then of course it did badly at the box office, and so I guess in came Albert Pian to say, "Oh, don't pack everything away quite yet."
Because I got a pretty shitty film up my sleeve.
Yeah, this is going to be the beginning of my decline, don't you know? Yeah.
Don't we just pick up my massive phone and give Vincent Klin a ring?
Yeah. So it's not the worst film I've seen on Amazon Prime. It's called Terminal Force.
It's not the worst film I've seen. Well, that's on the poster, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. I do. I do like Bridget Nielsen. She's pretty cool in it. And she does look the part, like, because she's obviously pretty strapping and like 6 foot, and it's quite funny the fact that the guy is so pathetic and she's so capable. But it's not great. But as I said, no worse than Master of the Universe.
Um, or Suburban Commando with Hulk Hogan. Um, I'm done on my final two films now. So the next one is, again, this is when I put on my Dennis Farina baseball hat and thought, yes, I need to see. So I just typed in Dennis Farina into Amazon Prime and just rode the roller coaster where it took me. And it took me to a 1992 film called Street Crimes, with, I think his name's Dennis Farina and Michael North.
Right. I've
So
heard
it's
of it.
it's billed as like one cop's got a gun, the other's got his fists, or if you
Mm.
look on, I think IMDb, inexplicably it's like one cop's got a gun, the other one's got a knife. It's like, what,
Why don't?
because they run out of guns? What?
Yeah. Why not just both have guns?
Yeah, I don't know what
Much
they.
more useful.
But what's really funny is, right, so this film, it started off, and before I talk about like the narrative, um it's Dennis Farina's like an old kind of cop, like a kind of wise guy sort of thing, and he is in a bar with his mates, who are all varying levels of unpleasantness, and Michael North is like the young sort of cop who's into martial arts. You can tell because of the height of his trousers, and it's like
Fighting
them.
trousers.
They're just fighting trousers. They're getting to sort of know each other. And I was watching this film, and I thought, Joe, I'm actually quite enjoying this. It's because Dennis Farina is so good, and it's basically him cracking jokes and showing him how it is, and they go around getting into fights, quite bad fights. But before I go into the fights, I'm going to read out what I've written here, because most of my notes for this film are about. I just want to put an image in everyone's heads of the clothes that the
Mm.
kind of karate cop Michael North, I think his name is wearing, right? So in every scene, he is wearing some variation of like cuffed, elasticated, baggy, stonewashed jeggings. So if you imagine they're cuffed at like the ankle and the waist, but they are voluminous, they are massive otherwise, right? He's supposed to be a policeman, but all of his tops are kind of, if you imagine, like he's either wearing like a Frankie Says Relax kind of crop top, which doesn't go down, it goes out almost horizontally, right? They're so short. And or when he's out and it's a bit chilly, he puts on his jacket, which is almost like an adamant sort of thing. it's like a short kind of top that doesn't fit him in any possible ratio. So it's too short to do up, too like tight to do up, but then too baggy and hanging down on the shoulders. So every time he starts running, his jacket just comes down, and he spends half the film. I don't know if he thought it looks cool, if the actor thought it looked cool. Every time he's in a fight or he's running after someone, his jacket's like half off, like a kid when they're sulking, like down by their elbows.
Yeah.
If you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So he looks completely ridiculous, and also he's clearly like a kickboxer. He does this little flick with his foot whenever he gets into a fight, which is really irritating. But the kicks are fine, but whenever there's any grappling in the film, it's really like clunkily edited. It's kind of, you obviously can't do it, so there's like a scramble, and then someone will just like roll away on the floor, sort of thing.
Right. When was it made?
1992.
Okay.
So it's going on. So basically, I'm watching this. I'm enjoying Dennis Farina. I'm enjoying this guy's astonishing like wardrobe, and I realized like 40 minutes, and I thought, oh, hang on, there is something missing here. There's no plot. It's just them like pottering around. So I think the director thought the same thing as me at that point. I thought we better check a plot. And actually, so the plot is that he arrests a guy, like an Asian American guy, and for selling drugs or whatever. And he says, "Oh no, how about you don't arrest me, and we meet at an old disused gym and we have a fight." And of course, being the sort of professional policeman now, they say, "Yeah, that's actually a really good idea."
Doesn't
So
sound like standard protocol.
no, he does flick through his book and he's like, it's not in here, but it seems fine. So they have a fight, and the Michael North beats the other guy, and then it's like, yeah, you've suddenly got to respect. So what the plot is this gym that they fought in, they kind of do it up, and it becomes like a sort of a playground, not a playground, like a neighborhood, sort of draws the neighborhood in to watch like people, the police officers, kind of in fair fights, fight like a member of the gang. So it's kind of like a street fighting thing, but kind of legalized in a gym almost.
Right.
And this brings the neighborhood together. So the main
okay.
bad guy, yes, right. So the main bad guy is a guy called Gerardo, who is a drug dealer. And his problem is, even though he owns the gym, that he's losing lots of money because the people now, they're not buying drugs, they're just going to watch these fights. So he's losing money, which I think simplifies the issues surrounding drug addiction.
I don't think that quite gets to the heart of the drug problem in America somehow. I don't think it's just that people haven't got like a community hall to go to somehow.
So there's a scene in the film where his trousers are so preposterous that when he's arresting someone, he can't put his gun in his pocket, and he glances at the camera and instead just like leans over slightly and like holds it between his legs as he cuffs him, and it just looks crap. There's the music is really good. It's this really simple, minimized sort of synth, which is quite moody and cool.
Fine.
But the bit I want to talk to you about before we move on is there's a sequence in it where Dennis Farina's blind daughter gets kidnapped. And she gets kidnapped and taken to this sort of this house somewhere. She doesn't know where she is, but she manages to break out of her room and call the police. But she dials 911, and it's like a dead line. But then when she rings Dennis Farina, her dad, it somehow gets through. I was like, okay. So previously to this scene, Michael North has gone to Gerardo's house, and Michael Gerardo has basically said to him, I've kidnapped Dennis Farina's daughter, and unless you stop this fighting so people buy drugs off me again, I'm not going to let her go. So then he goes back to Dennis Farina just as his daughter rings and says, oh, look, I kind of know where I am. It's down Mulholland. I could kind of sense the van turning and so on. And she gets cut off, and Dennis Farina says, oh, she's on Mulholland Drive somewhere, but that's like a million houses. We'll never find her. And Michael North says, actually, it narrows down to one house, Gerardo's house. And Dennis Farina says, that is literally the last place we would think to look. And then and I thought, is it though? Because Michael North has just come back from Gerardo's house and said, oh, he's just said he's got your daughter. So this whole sequence didn't need to happen. It's like they didn't notice it when it was being edited.
I think that's quite likely, to be honest.
So, and then the last thing I'll say is, at the end, when they're having the big, Michael North and Gerardo having this big sort of standoff fight, a fight that I put it to you, Michael North would lose because Gerardo is massive. And also, he's not shown as a very capable fighter throughout.
Right.
He gets like a real kicking before he kind of lucks into a win. And at the end, they both sort of fighting, and then they just sort of fall over at the same time and say, oh, should we just say I won?
That does not sound like a very satisfying ending.
It's really dispiriting. Because I thought, why did they fall over then? Oh no, so they can have a conversation. So yeah, it's not bad. It's held together by Dennis Farina, but it is very much just like an early '90s action sort of martial arts film.
Yeah, I know this one's on Prime because I've seen it on my watch list.
You should watch it.
Yeah,
if only for his clothes. They're astonishing.
Right, good. Let's talk about Moon 44. Right. The opening titles of this film, right? You know, when it comes up with like a little bit of wording to give a bit of context to what's happening, because this is set in the future.
Does it just go, this is crap?
It says, by the year 2038, that's 18 years from now, human beings control the universe.
Bloody hell.
Not the solar system, not the galaxy, the universe.
I can't even control my bowels.
This is 2038. That's like next decade. And we're controlling the universe. So basically, rival companies are fighting for resources in space. And naturally, Michael Paré, Brian Thompson, and Malcolm McDowell are the last hope for Moon 44.
Can you say those 2-3 names again?
Michael Paré, Brian Thompson, and Malcolm McDowell.
When was this made?
1990.
Oh my god!
It's a sci-fi action film. I put action in inverted commas. It's directed by Roland Emmerich. This is before, obviously, Universal Soldier, Stargate, Independence Day, etc. And there's kind of a conspiracy / detective story in there too. There isn't actually that much action. It's mostly just men and teenagers sitting around in knockoff alien sets arguing. They constantly argue. They're not. It's not characters as such. They're just argument machines. They just come into a room and just choose someone to argue with. So it's really contrived, that kind of drama. The first, literally 3/4 of the film are just training missions. The whole galactic corporate war thing is basically just shoved aside instantly, and so it's just them antagonizing each other needlessly. And I found myself begging for an actual recognizable enemy at some point. Um, the uh, the model work is pretty good. This is obviously pre-CG, so there's some good model work when the ships are flying around. Um, it has it's weird. It has this kind of quite accessible kind of mainstream tone. Um, Partly because basically all the pilots are like the buff dudes, like Michael Parry and Brian Thompson, but then all the navigators back at the base are all on the computers. They are like teenage hacker boys basically. Um, so it has this kind of slightly kind of young adult tone, but then there's loads and loads of like really harsh swearing in it, and there's this whole like really harsh subplot about sexual assault and suicide. So it's not really any good for kids or anything. Um, yeah, it's not. It's disappointing in a way because it certainly looks it, it it certainly looks better than probably its budget should allow. If you see what I mean, in terms of production design, and obviously the cast is amazing as we've already discussed. Um,
I've never seen Brian Thompson in anything where he's not just jutting his jaw forward and taking his top off. What kind of character does
well,
he
I'm sorry
play?
to disappoint you because that's pretty much what he does in this film.
I was just thinking like this like space opera, and I'm just trying to think what part Brian Thompson could play in it.
Well, his character is stupid, really, because I mean he's really, really harsh at the start, like really unpleasant to the newcomers, sort of thing, and
Right.
just a real proper bully. And by the end, he just absolutely loves his navigator, and he's like, yeah, buddy, and all this kind of stuff. You know, you're keeping me alive, and all this kind of crap. Um, I can't imagine there are many Roland Emmerich completionists around, but I would say that this one's for them only. Because really, I mean, if you're going to watch a kind of off-world detective type story, then you might as well just watch Outland with Sean Connery. Why wouldn't you?
Uh,
And yeah, and it's not really enough action. And even when the action comes along, it's very much all in the spacecraft, and it's just done with models. So the only real kind of action involving people is just them in the cockpit shouting at each other and stuff. So yeah, it's a bit disappointing in that respect, and the script isn't good enough to make it an interesting dramatically. So I mean, so that was a bit disappointing, really.
I might watch that just because Brian Thompson's in it, though.
Well, yeah, and Michael Parry. So
Basically, yeah, your review then to me was so Moon 44, Michael Parry, Brian Thompson, Brian Thompson, juts his chin forward. That's all I cared about.
Malcolm McDowell must have rang in your ears a little bit. His accent in any film, it's just I don't know why I don't believe that he picked up. You don't pick up that much of an accent, just because you live in America. So he is clearly trying to put it on in some way.
No. Actually, I did also. By the way, Michael North looks like a young Patrick Swayze. But he did an interview with Mark Maron a couple of months
Alright.
ago, and he has got a very odd accent because he'll
Yeah.
sound very British, and then he'll just suddenly
Yeah,
this real like New York twang will come into it, and you're like, it's a very strange accent. He has got an odd accent.
is. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, he's done an awful lot of that sort of thing.
Like he'll say, "I was laughing my ass off," and you think, you're in an interview now. You're not on a film set.
Yeah.
You can just see it
It
is
is.
that is how he speaks.
Right.
Right, let's
Yeah.
move 44 on my list then. Was that Amazon Prime or Netflix or
That was
Love
that was
Film
Prime.
Prime? I'm down to my last one now.
Yeah.
And this is a film that I watched last night called Under the Gun. And the reason I watched it is because I found out that Kurt Thomas, the gymnast and star of 1985 classic Jim Carter, had died, 69 years old. Apparently, I was reading about him last night, and he kind of came up with this move in athletics called the I think it's called the Salter.
Right.
And it's like a way, it's like a leap and a way of kind of ending a routine. And apparently, it's paralyzed loads of people, and it's banned now.
Jeez.
So I thought that's really full on. There's a load of I didn't know what I think it's just called a salter, what it was, and when I typed it into YouTube, it was just footage of people doing it and then getting paralyzed. And I thought, well, I don't want to watch that. That's really harsh. So I still don't know what it is, um, but I just thought, well, that's just really unfortunate. Anyway, Kurt Thomas is dead, harsh. So obviously, the main bad guy in Jim Carter was Richard Norton, who is mainly known as a stunt coordinator and fight choreographer, and he is very capable. And he's shown up in a lot of stuff over the years. But Under the Gun is a 1995. They call it an Ozploitation film, but it's just an action film made in Australia,
Right.
or more specifically, on another film's set in Australia that Richard Norton starred in. So this is a film where Richard Norton plays. He's got bleached blonde hair for some reason. It starts off and it's mid 90s, right? So it's 1995. So you can imagine, like, it's very much bright blue cowboy jeans that everyone looks like they've bought from George and Asda, and just the billowing shirts and and everything's really bright. And the story is that he is a nightclub owner of this place called the Boilermaker. They reckon he's supposed to be in America, but everyone in the film speaks with a thick Australian accent. And they're using American money. You think just say it's in Australia. It would just be much more easy for viewers.
Yeah.
And he sold his bar. He just needs to get through one night, and then he can get this $1.3 million payoff and bugger off with his extremely hot wife into the sunset, because he's kind of had a guts full of it all. So the film starts off, and there's spoilers galore because it's 1995, so it's over the 20 years. And the first thing I noticed about the film was I like Richard Norton, and he's a very capable martial artist, and he's worked on a lot of cool stuff. Interestingly, the director, I've forgotten his name now. Oh, sorry, Matthew George, was 21 when he made the film, but he became much more famous later on as a producer, and he did stuff like Wind River.
All right.
So it's like I think he's in the Guinness Book of Records as like the youngest director in Australia for like a film that earns so much money, or whatever.
Right.
But this film, it's supposed to be a bar, and it's supposed to be filmed primarily at night, and it is not. It is a film set, and it's so like artificially lit and bright, and so stagey. And some points when the camera turns around to follow people as they go through the bar, you can just see where they've just put cloth over the top of stuff to hide the pipes, because they're clearly in the warehouse. Yeah. And the way it's all set up is that this is clearly filmed another film set, because in the middle of this bar, where this like really stagey kind of bar, serving areas, there's a pit, and around this pit there's like steel kind of gantry steps going into it, and a load of like vertical kitchen like fluorescent tubes around it. It's like, well, that wouldn't be in a bar. They would smash and electrocute people pouring drinks everywhere. This is clearly like, I don't know, a spaceship set or something. So the whole film goes on, and it's kind of a light-hearted comedy where it's Richard Norton going through. He's got like a goofy kind of bouncer, and a mob coming in trying to take his money. He's got someone who comes in who looks like an Australian version of Donald Pleasance, trying to kind of take him down, and he's hiding these drugs that are on the premises and stuff. And the film goes on, and it's kind of like okay, but it's very clear that no one in the film is a capable actor, and it's only half decent when the fight scenes kick off. Because obviously I get the impression that he's got his stunt team in as bit parts, so the fighting is solid. And then the film goes on, and at the end, the main thing of the film, the main thrust of the film is before he even opens for the night, as he turns up to the shift at the bar, he obviously owns it, but to open it, there's two Asian businessmen who come in, and they are there to buy the bar off him, which is all he cares about. He just wants to be shot of it. And they've got this 1.3 million in a briefcase, and they say to him, we just need to run through a few more things with your accountant, and then we'll just sign it over. And his accountant is like, I'm going to be there in 2 hours. And that is what sets the film up, right?
Yeah.
So all this nonsense and bollocks goes on. And at the very end of the film, when the police finally bugger off and everything's done, and his wife, even though she's seen him kissing a 20-year-old, has forgiven him, he said, oh, she's young, she doesn't know what she was doing. And if I was his wife, I would have said, I'm not so much worried about what she was doing, Richard. It was your kind of half of the bargain I'm interested in. You kissing her, if you will. She's a total screamer as well. But anyway, at the end of the film, it's all done. The Asian businessmen walk in and then reveal that actually, they just want to take his 450 grand because they haven't got the money to give him anyway. So they just point a gun at him, and it kicks off the final shootout.
Right.
And I thought to myself, you have walked out of this bar multiple times through this film, and Richard Norton has happened to be near you when you've gone to leave, and he's talked you back in. And you could have just, at the start, when Richard Norton was there by himself, without any staff, shot him and taken his money. Why have you waited 2 hours to, like, suddenly now, at the worst time, take that opportunity to get your money back? So it's not a plot that holds up to close scrutiny.
No. Is
but
it good overall? If you can ignore that particular plot logic, is it okay overall?
No.
Okay.
No. It's just, it's too trashy. It's too, like, televisual. The whole thing is just so cheap. Like, with the joke. In films where it looks like a kind of, I don't know, Stargate SG-1 kind of film set, where they're just always in the same room and they've shifted the furniture around, and all the jokes are kind of, what's the word, like corny kind of slapsticky stuff.
Mm.
And then you'll have, like, really harsh swearing, and then someone will get shot in the guts, and you think there's no like tonal cohesiveness here. It's just like you're just filming. Oh, what happens next? Let's film that. Like a load of mates having fun almost.
Yeah.
I would see Richard Norton. I think Richard Norton is better behind the camera as opposed to just in front of it, not acting very well.
Right. Yeah. It's a particular problem for I see in young directors is getting that tonal balance right.
Very much so.
I don't know whether it's to do, like, because you think about something like Midnight Run, where we're saying that it's very tonally well balanced, and I don't think it's just to do with the script and a lot of these things. Because, for example, I mean, on that same topic, I mean, Beverly Hills Cop, for example, was written as a serious cop thriller. They put Eddie Murphy in it, and it had comedic elements, but it's still underneath quite a serious, like, cop thriller. And yet they managed to balance those elements of comedy and like drama and the thrills very well, just like a Midnight Run. And I think it's something that younger directors struggle with, I think, which is why it was so surprising when, like, Tarantino broke through in the 90s as a young director, that he was able to get that balance right, and why so many of his pretenders failed to get it right.
I think as well, it's almost like, because he's quite a strong personality, you get the impression that he's got, like, a handle on the cast. Yes. Like, he's got a vision, and it's like, it's not okay. I know I'm young, but don't piss around. Don't just do your thing. Like, actually act like I want you to. Like the characters, like there's a bit in this film in Under the Gun where he's got Richard Norton has got, like, a bouncer who is like a doorman, not a bouncer, who's kind of got a stutter. And he looks a lot like Crispin Glover, weirdly. And he's, at the end of the film, he kind of turns on him, and it turns out that he's just a drug addict. And he turns out he's been causing all this trouble for the whole film. And Richard Norton's like, I'd rather you didn't do that. We've been friends for like 40 years. And he says, go away, I forgive you, but just leave me alone. And then he turns around and pulls out a gun and tries to shoot Richard Norton, who kicks it out of his hand, beats him up and says, look, just go. And the guy's like, yeah, okay. And then he picks up a knife and tries to stab Richard Norton, who twists it out of his hand, throws it away and says, look, go away. And then he does something else and gets killed. And Richard Norton then, like, he dies in his arms, and he's like, oh, I forgive you. And I thought, you give him a few chances there, really, Richard. But again, there's this kind of earnestness at the end, and you think this is not in keeping with the tone of the film. Yeah. And I get the impression, like you say, a young director would just be on the set, because he would have been 20 at the time.
Yeah.
And Richard Norton would already be like a kind of well into his career, in his, like, late 30s, early 40s, choreographer. And you can imagine, like, young directors not having control over a set.
Yeah, not having an overarching kind of idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I would rather that than a 50-year-old man writing dialogue for a hip 20-year-old woman.
Oh, we had to come back to that, didn't we?
That's a new low of scripts for me. So anyway, that's me done and dusted. So what have you got?
Well, I have got Return to Oz. This was on Disney Plus, because obviously it's a Disney movie. And this is a film which it fits into that kind of pantheon of weird, scary fantasy films for kids made in the 80s. You know, along with, like, Labyrinth, Dark Crystal, Neverending Story, and stuff like that. What I was reading up about this, and what's interesting is that it's the only film directed by Walter Murch, and I recognized the name, and I thought, I know that person. Of course, he's an editor by trade, and he started his editing career with Orson Welles, and he worked with Francis Ford Coppola, and he's still editing movies today, in fact. So that's
Wow.
pretty
So
cool.
what film is this? Sorry.
This is Return to Oz.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It is a direct sequel to Wizard of Oz, obviously made 45 years later, wherever it is. So it's a direct sequel, except weirdly, Dorothy is 6 years younger than she was in the original.
All right.
Wow, yeah, she's played by Fairuza Balk,
Bloody hell.
and it's a completely different style to the Wizard of Oz, and there's a lot of kind of location scenes and stuff.
Am I
It,
right in thinking this is the one that terrified children? I've never seen this.
yes, well, I mean, it's got actually underneath, it's essentially hits the same kind of beats with regard to kind of friendship as the original, and it's got a kind of similar cast of characters. This time around, there's like a pumpkin head guy, there's this robot soldier, there's a chicken, and a sofa, a talking sofa. There you go.
Of course.
Yeah, it is quite intense for kids. There's like there's these like evil henchmen called the Wheelers, which are these horrendous like punk-looking guys with really elongated limbs and wheels for hands and feet. And there's this the queen, the evil queen, is called Queen Mombi. She's played by Jean Marsh, who also played the evil Queen Bavmorda in Willow, obviously.
Okay.
And but yeah, she is someone who like has with a load of interchangeable heads. So there's quite an infamously terrifying sequence where Dorothy is trying to go and steal a key from her, and she's got this huge kind of hallway with all these glass cabinets, and there's like these disembodied heads in each of them sleeping, and then she accidentally wakes them up and they all start screaming, and it's horrendous. So that's pretty.
You basically every week you have to watch a really foul children's film. We've got the Witches, and Return to Oz.
Yeah, The Witch is another one to throw into the pile. Yeah, and actually before she even goes to Oz, Dorothy is being because she's obviously going on about like Oz is this special place and stuff, and the doctors, well, her parents and doctors think there's something wrong with her, so naturally she's like strapped down and she's about to get electroshock treatment. It's absolutely horrendous. The special effects are quite good, but then I suppose it would be because they threw money at it. It's not bad. It's too dark and grim to kind of stand alongside stuff like Labyrinth and Dark Crystal and things. And I'm always bothered by kind of fantasy worlds where they don't have rules. It doesn't have like an internal logic to it. They tend to just be kind of a series of amusing ideas, kind of lazily strung together. Because like there are some cute ideas in this, like where like she'll go up to there's a tree when she first gets to Oz, and it doesn't just have like apples on it. It has full like lunch boxes hanging from it, so you can have like a whole lunch, which is kind of cute, but it just nothing really makes sense. It's more like I suppose it's meant to be like a
true fantasy world.
Yeah, for like a projection of our imagination, I guess. So it's to be expected. And plus, I suppose kids don't really care about the internal logic of these worlds. So, but yeah, it's kind of a weird curiosity more than anything. I think if it didn't have anything to do with the Wizard of Oz, then it would probably be forgotten about quite firmly. But Fairuza Balk's quite sweet in it. She's very good. But yeah, bafflingly much younger than she was in his direct predecessor. So that was weird.
Yeah, because Fairuza Balk went on to be in The Craft, was that big film for her, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, good movie. So yeah, that was Return to Oz. I think basically it's if you never watched it first time around, there's not really any point of watching it now because it would probably just be a bit weird and dark. But if you watched it when it was around first time, then it's interesting to go back and see just how intense it is and why it is that it terrified children at the time.
And is it understandable as to why it terrified children? When I was concerned just by the pictures of the witches in The Witcher.
Yeah,
That was
I
editing.
don't think
thought,
it's as
okay.
it's not as like aggressively foul as something like The Witch is, but and I'm not. I think people tend to go on like overstate how traumatic certain films are for kids, because these were the sorts of films that I've alluded to. They were around in the 80s and early 90s, and yeah, they were intense, but it's not like they actually scarred us all, you know. Kids like being scared. I enjoyed being scared. It was, you know, I was terrified by the melting faces at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it's not like I'm so traumatized that I couldn't possibly go back and watch that movie again. It's just like, you know, it's a good director will know how far to push it. And I do think this is it just about is on the right side of completely traumatizing. So
But
yeah.
not a good enough film to warrant it.
No, not really. It's just, yeah, I think it's just not exciting enough really for the demands of you, like kids today, for example. I think if you were to show this to a kid now, they would just take away the scary bits and not really understand what was going on. Yeah, so it's like you know, you could watch Wizard of Oz, and different age groups could be quite transported by the kind of colors, the dance and sequences and the songs and stuff, and it would also have that scary element. Whereas this has just got the darkness and the scariness, not really anything else to it. Definitely no songs.
I was going to say, are there any songs in it? There's
Ew. Right, so that's pretty much everything. I've got so many more films to talk about, but we're just brushing up against 2 hours now.
Yeah, it's 1 hour 51. So no, that seems I'm happy to sort of stop there. So, usual rules apply. What would you say has been your film of the week?
Right. Yeah, let's see now. A Time to Kill is, I mean, it's the only real quality film I've watched, to be honest. Because I'm looking at McBain. I mean, Edmond was interesting, but possibly too unpleasant to enjoy as such. Yeah, so I think A Time to Kill for me on Amazon Prime, directed by Joel Schumacher.
I just realised that I've got one I missed, Ocean's 8, but we'll talk about that next time. It's a toss-up for me between Midnight Run and Internal Affairs, and I'm going to lean more towards Midnight Run because it feels more timeless. Yeah, so I would say Midnight Run has been the film of the week for me.
Yeah, good. Yeah, very good film.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been we've had some good ones, we've had some pretty shoddy ones, but
yeah, and we'll have more next time.
yeah, there'll be more total shash. Don't worry about that. So right then, yeah, I'll love you and leave you, and I'll get this up as soon as I can, and everyone should watch Midnight Run at A Time to Kill.
Excellent. Until the next time, I love you.
Pardon?